The Nissan Skyline GTR is the most iconic sports car to have ever come out of Japan. For decades, it's managed to rattle other high-end manufacturers both on the road and on the racetrack. And over that time, it spawned 6 generations of the GTR family tree. But the most infamous one of them all is this. The R34. When driving this one, it's easy to see as to why. It goes like you wouldn't believe. Its engine is so capable you can extract a gazillion horsepower of it with a few minor modifications and even more. It looks good, it sounds mega, and it's loved and cherished by so many all over the world. And yes, the R34 Skyline is a modern classic car, but the going rate of these, they're as much as a brand new Lamborghini Huracan or a Porsche 992 Turbo S. That's a lot of money. We're talking about £150,000 here. Is it worth that sort of cash? Is it the real deal? Or is it some cliche car that Paul Walker used to drive?
Shift the whole party and straight lift. You jump up to the sound of the bump of the beat. This is for the street. Come on.
To understand why, we need to take a trip down memory lane to dissect the origin of the GTR. So let's pull over, have a coffee, maybe a meal, and work it all out. Now, the original Skyline, it was actually not built by Nissan. It was first introduced in 1957 by Japan's Prince Motor Company. Its purpose was actually to be a humble family 4-door saloon, a little bit like Ford Mondeo, Chevrolet Malibus at the time. The Prince Motor Company in 1966 was then bought by Nissan, not necessarily because of its design or its practicality, but the main reason was of what happened at the 1964 Japanese Grand Prix at Suzuka. A team of modified Skyline GTs was entered into that race amongst some of the very best from Europe and across the pond. It was the battle of the greats versus the rookie.
一方、ツーリングクラスに出場した S50D のスカイラインも
In the end, the Skyline took an impressive second place behind the very successful Porsche 904 GTS. This sparked Nissan's light of the Skyline's potential future in racing and also a future performance road car. Nissan wanted that piece of the golden cake. At the Tokyo Motor Show in 1969, the Skyline 2000 GTR was born. It packed a 2-litre straight 6 with dual overhead cams, 4 valves per cylinder, a red line of 7,000 RPM, which was all pretty impressive for its day, especially at 150 horsepower. But where this car really shined was when Nissan, or Datsun should I say, took it to go racing. Thanks to McPherson front struts, a limited slip differential and a Revy straight 6 with a codename designation the S20, the little GTR went on to dominating its opposition in touring car racing. In fact, it won 50 races within the first 3 years. With such impressive results, the 2000 GTR created its own fan base, a fan base that loved it so much that they gave it a nickname. Hakusuka, which means box skyline. I know it doesn't sound particularly exciting in English, but in Japanese, Hakusuka, that sounds mega. It sounds like the name of a Japanese spy thriller played by Jackie Chan. So, the Skyline 2000 GTR, or the Hakusuka GTR, was a huge success.
It was a great racing car, a great road car, and more importantly, it cemented Nissan's name in the performance legacy car brand amongst the entire world. So the second generation GTR should be even more of a success. Well, it kind of was and wasn't, because it sort of came out at a pretty bad time, because in 1973, when it was unveiled, the world oil crisis happened, which meant that, well, fuel prices was extremely high and there was tougher emissions regulations, which meant that the car wasn't really that much of an improvement from the legendary Hackett-Suckett GTR. And then we didn't see a GTR at all for at least 16 years. But when Nissan did finally unveil the next Skyline GTR in 1989, boy, did they come back fighting.
Now, most of us know that the R32 GTR was built as a road car, but its main purpose was not just to excite mere mortals on a country road. We all know, Nissan was on a mission to succeed in Group A racing.
Straight look at the speed of this car. The field, he's opened the gap up to 32.5 seconds. He's with Jim Richards. Here he comes, making the move on Nick Johnson. To the outside, the left-hander sits up here.
Freddie Gibson's done a tremendous job with this car.
At the car's heart was a 2.6 litre twin turbocharged straight six, codename RB26DETT. In road car form, it produced in the Japanese Gentleman's Agreement of 276 horsepower, but in the race car, it chucked out upwards of 500 horsepower, with very few minor modifications. And so when Nissan finally took its new weapon straight to the Touring Car Championship, it didn't just beat the opposition, it completely destroyed them. And it was the same story in Group A championships in Australia, winning twice at the Bathurst 1000 and many others. In fact, it embarrassed all of its competitors, so much so that the Australian governing bodies decided to ban turbocharging and four-wheel drive, in which coincidentally the R32 had. But despite that, it still went on to winning races in Europe, and it even won at the famous Pikes Peak. In the mid-90s came Godzilla's successor, the R33. It carried over pretty much everything the R32 had, with some microscopical changes, but it was 100 kilograms heavier, and some might say that this styling wasn't to everyone's taste. It was the forgotten child in the group. Don't get me wrong, it wasn't bad, it just didn't have the same impact as its predecessor. And then we come to this, the R34 GTR. Like the R33, it carries over the same engine, the RB26 2.6 litre twin turbocharged straight six, the same all-wheel drive system. It was more hardcore, the turbos had been slightly spooled up. It was more of an animal, it was stiffer, it was harder, it was stronger. Did it carry a racing pedigree like it did from the R32? No, but what it did carry over was something very, very special that came onto many cinema screens. Yes, of course, it's the Fast and the Furious. If you know the movies, then you'll know that on a couple of occasions that the Skyline featured was Brian's car, played by the late Paul Walker, who went on to owning several of them for himself. Its cinema fame of it racing around the streets, being hurled around all over the place, created a cult hero and fan base all over the globe.
Dude, I almost had you.
Some might say created the millennial car enthusiast. But the brilliant thing about the GTR R34, not only the fact that you can extract a gazillion horsepower, but how much of it you can use. From many years I've been going on about that. The most amount of power you need is around about 400 to 500. Even then, you can still get yourself into some serious trouble. Take for this one, for example. It's a 2.8 litre stroker kit done by JM Imports. They know a thing or two about making GTRs go fast, and this one is pushing out 650 horsepower. It's still got the clever all-wheel drive system, which is predominantly rear bias. But the way you can absorb and use and sort of get on the power is just mind-boggling. It's more of the sensations of the way it drives. Now, if you were to put this same amount of power into the newer GTR, the R35, it would just absorb it all because, you know, the turbos would spool up so quickly and you just take off. With this, because there's so much lag, I mean, look, 3,000 RPM, that big turbo needs to spool up. When you do, you change gear and wait for it to all build up again. That means that you just hear all these sensations of drums. I mean, that motor, that straight six, listen to it just howl away. But more importantly, if you drop it down a few cogs and get it into the power band, in fact, let's try second here, 6,000 RPM, all the way up to 8. The steering, it's got beautiful feedback. The seating position is so nice. This short shifter, it's got a couple of Nismo tweaks done to it, but that's the beauty about R34 GTRs. It's a little bit like the Toyota Supra, but even better. You can build an R34 to your needs. If you want it to be a drag car, it can be a drag car. If you want it to be a track car, it can be a track car. If you want it to be a B-road basher, it can do that. And it's one of those cars, like I always find in some of the great ones, like the Porsche Cayman, the 911, it caters to all driving experiences. Doesn't matter whether you're a racing driver or a yobbo or even a car thief, you'll have a ball of a time.
And then we get on to the subject of price. These R34s aren't cheap. This specific one, currently for sale at VG Performance Cars, is up for £150,000, which is a lot of money. But after spending a couple of days driving one, it's safe to say that it's more than just a car. It's an icon. Its history, pedigree of it dominating its opposition on racetracks, as well as creating a universal following in the tuning world and on the big screen, certainly shows for that. It's one of the very few cars in the world that ticks all of the boxes, and like I said earlier, it's truly loved by everyone. We owe credit to Shinichiro Sakurai for the creation, and we definitely owe it to our favourite movie car guy for influencing everyone else. Is it worth £150,000? Yes, every penny of it.
This thing's a bastard!